to Truth and Lies Radio, a program dedicated to revealing the truth and exposing the lies about the destruction of your freedom and prosperity and what you can do about it. And now, your host, former Washington right-wing activist, international living, banking and asset protection author and expert, and American patriot in exile, David Finzer.
This is David Finzer broadcasting for the next 2.5 hours from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad, along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia, on my 5,234th day of voluntary exile across 6 countries in protest from an ever less free America. To comment during the program, you can send me a Skype text message at Truth and Lies Radio, all one word, or you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com. As soon as our new studio is finally finished, still waiting on contractors and on Bell South and AT&T, you will also be able to call in toll-free from the U.S. and Canada or Skype and join the conversation. Also, please remember to check out our Facebook and YouTube pages at Truth and Lies Radio Show. According to the big clock on the truthandliesradio.com's FATCA/Taxmageddon Day countdown page, your taxes will skyrocket and your worldwide financial privacy will expire in 139 days, 12 hours, 50 minutes, and 58 seconds. Well, not surprisingly, all representatives of the liberal mainstream media have been chosen to host the presidential debates in the United States. The Commission on Presidential Debates controls the way the debates are set up, the format, the moderators, etc. Many conservatives have accused the organization of showing a left-wing tilt. Of course, unless you have one leg that's 2 inches shorter than the other, it would be impossible not to notice the left-wing tilt that the Commission on Presidential Debates has had. The Daily Caller reported Monday that its 9-member board includes a past president of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, as well as Howard Buffett, the son of Berkshire Hathaway's #1 Obama backer, Warren Buffett, the one who says everybody should pay more taxes. Longtime conservative main media watchdog Brent Bozell, and I mean long time, he's been there since I was in Washington in the 80s, severely criticized the choice of only mainstream media correspondents to moderate this year's presidential debates, and he blames the GOP for letting it happen. Of course, they're part of the problem, just like Obama and the Democrats. They're not part of any solution. The Commission on Presidential Debates announced the schedule for this year's all-important presidential debates on Monday. No conservatives were named, no conservative journalists or libertarian journalists were named, just the usual, as it says in Casablanca, the usual suspects. The final and usually most important debate will be moderated by Bob Schieffer, a very old, long-time, left-wing CBS correspondent and the moderator of Face the Nation. While he is well respected in the mainstream media circles, he's not particularly liked by the right, and he has a habit of asking questions on Face the Nation that suggest his point of view. For example, he asks, has the Tea Party made compromise a dirty word, and is that why Congress can't get anything done? Well, that's what he asked Michelle Bachmann earlier this year. You know, that seems to imply a point of view that's certainly left of me, but then there are a lot of people left of me, but even left of center. Bozell says he is, quote, rather surprised. I think he's playing with British understatement there. Knowing Brent, he's probably really frigging mad, but and yelling and screaming, but he's just saying rather surprised to the press that no one from Fox News will moderate a debate. In November 2010, Fox's election night coverage drew more viewers in the 10 p.m. slot than any other broadcast network. They're no longer outside players. They're major players in this. I don't see why Brett Baer, I don't see why Shepard Smith and a number of other people who are not doctrinaire conservatives by any step of the imagination, why don't we see them? Or what about Brit Hume? Brit Hume has great integrity. I think he has more integrity than virtually any other journalist of whom, which I can think right or left in Washington. I don't always agree with Brit, but he certainly has integrity. There's somebody from the Washington Examiner, the Washington Times, or where are they? Or Newsmax. It's not like the left has a monopoly on talent. Of course, they just have a monopoly on the governmental institutions and these private commissions and all of these non-governmental organizations that are governmentally funded. That way they can make the right look bad, the left look good, and it's just a bunch of baloney. Bozell said, I wish they'd make a very public statement that the Republicans aren't going to put up with any shenanigans anymore. It's the same old, he calls the same old, where the questions come from left field from the Republicans, where it's hardballs to the GOP and softballs to the Democrats. He thinks the Republicans should make a big issue of this. I think that the big issue should be the fact that Gary Johnson, from the Libertarian Party, who is going to be on the ballot in every one of the states of the United States, isn't going to be on the as part of the presidential campaigns and have a fair chance. The Democrats and Republicans keep this locked up, and because of that, I think the Republicans, to a certain extent, deserve what they get. Well, we will talk more about Republicans and actually monarchy to a certain extent when we come back in just a few minutes. This is David Finzer. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio. How could you have a monarchy without a coronation? And that's what the Republicans are planning in Tampa, is a coronation ceremony. It's not a national convention. A national convention is something where the party gets together and employs the democratic process and votes to elect their candidate for President of the United States. The Republican Party has forfeited that by the sleazy tactics of Mr. Romney in taking away delegate votes from Ron Paul right and left by every trick in the book, every crooked, sleazy maneuver. So I refuse to call it a convention. It's a coronation where they're crowning Mr. Romney as their nominee. And everybody's pitching in on it. It's just amazing. They all want to be on the winning side. I've never seen such a bigger bunch of front runners in my life. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was giving the keynote address at the Republican National Convention later this month. Republican officials directly involved in the planning say Christie will speak during the coronation ceremony in Tampa, Florida. The officials spoke of the condition of anonymity because the formal announcement was not planned until today. Christie's a first-term governor who's known for his blunt and sometimes acidic tone and is already a favorite among fiscal conservatives of the party, which means he's probably not a favorite among social conservatives, libertarians, etc. in many cases. Some urged him to seek the presidential nomination, but he declined and endorsed Romney. Meanwhile, Senator Marco Rubio, who an awful lot of people thought would be the nominee, the senator from Florida, has won a big consolation prize. He's been selected to introduce Romney at the party's convention. Now, that's not just, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Mitt Romney. This is going to be something that approaches, "Hail Caesar, we who are about to die salute you." I mean, it's going to be disgusting. It's probably going to make me very sick if I even decide to stay up late and watch it. Thank God for the 6-hour time difference. At least I can read about it first, and then if I want to watch videos, I can, if my stomach's strong enough, I can. The decision to give the freshman senator a place in the national spotlight should provide Romney with a boost to the conference in Rubio's vitally home state, according to the Tampa Bay Times. The announcement came just a day after the two men campaigned together in Florida, and shows that Rubio is considered, quote, an integral part of our campaign, said Romney campaign manager Matt Rhodes. Anybody who will get Romney 3 votes is an integral part of his campaign. Now, that doesn't mean an integral part of the administration. That doesn't mean they're going to have one damn bit of influence 30 seconds after Romney takes his hand off the Bible, assuming his hand and the Bible don't both go up in flames. But I guess since they didn't with Obama, Romney's probably safe. But nevertheless, they'll be an integral part of the campaign. The party expects a massive television audience for Romney's August 30th acceptance speech of the Tampa convention. 4 years ago, crazy man John McCain's speech was watched by 39 viewers. Now, it's possible they watched it to see if he was going to drool or, say gibberish. He says so many things that are gibberish. I wouldn't have been surprised, but his handlers kept him intact, kept him controlled, and I guess they gave him his pills or whatever, so he didn't make a fool of himself. He just didn't make any sense either. Since the last night of the convention usually has the largest audience, it's a great opportunity to showcase leaders who will play an important role in shaping the future of the Republican Party. Marco Rubio is that kind of leader, Rhodes said in a statement. Well, I know that Juan Torres, who will be on tomorrow, he's a Cuban-American from Florida. He doesn't like Marco Rubio very much, and I don't know that Marco has a whole lot of support in the Cuban community. He is really too far left for the Cuban community. Now, aside from everybody already bowing and scraping and tugging at their forelock to Mr. Romney, the accolades for the vice presidential nominee, presumptive, and remember, one vice president described the office as being equivalent to a warm bucket of spit. We have such of the glitterati as real estate mogul Donald Trump, who called the decision to have Paul Ryan as the VP on the Republican ticket something bold, energizing, and courageous. What I think is bold, energizing, and courageous is the number of times that real estate mogul Trump starts projects and then they go bankrupt a few years later. But everybody seems to forget that. It's a bold pick, and it has really energized the Republican Party, our Mr. Trump said. It was a courageous pick in a certain way. He had to do something, and something was done. Whether it was a great pick or not, we're going to find out in 90 days. I think we're going to find out sooner than that. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who has some guts, he stood up to the union thugs in Wisconsin, which is pretty hard to do. He says Representative Ryan's addition to the Republican presidential ticket will help pull independents and intelligent Democrats, which is almost an oxymoron, away from President Barack Obama. Excuse me, I called him president again. I got to stop that. It's a bad habit. To deliver the state and the nation to Romney in November. Well, I suppose it's possible, but it's very rare that one congressman out of 10 is going to bring a whole state along in the presidential election. Now, a senator, maybe. A congressman, not that I can recall. And Wisconsin almost never goes for Republicans. The last time, I think, was Ronald Reagan. I think it will be have a very big impact, the Republican governor told Greta Van Susteren on Fox News. Paul comes from one of the most politically competitive congressional districts in the country. It is almost evenly split between Republican and Democrat. It's urban, suburban, and rural, a perfect microcosm of America. I don't know, but I got to tell you, if Southern Wisconsin is the perfect microcosm of America, then the cheeseheads are the perfect example of Americans. I'm glad I haven't lived there in 14 years. Even the normally very, very right-wing daily newsletter Liberty Alert wrote, in selecting Representative Paul Ryan, Romney, who up until now seemed to be running a campaign based entirely on the strategy of allowing Obama to continue unspooling the statist, unconstitutional, and arrogant rope with which he will ultimately hang himself, sent a message to the Tea Party, an increasingly libertarian wing of the GOP, that their voices would be heard. Well, now, wait a minute. I disagree with that because Ryan voted for the Patriot Act. What is libertarian about the Patriot Act? What is constitutional about the Patriot Act? The answer is nothing. Nada. Nishta. I don't care what language you say it in, it is one big goose egg zero. Now, granted, Romney's occasional, I'm still now talking about from the Liberty Alert, he goes on to say that Romney's occasional left-wing political inclinations are hardly a guarantee that those voices would be heeded, but compared to the deliberate deafness of the self-styled savior currently stepping on our collective necks, it beats nothing. Well, that's true, and a pair of deuces beats nothing too. But I don't know that we have anything much better than a pair of deuces. Ryan does swing the Republican Wisconsin back into play, but again, I just don't think it's going to be enough. But not everybody is so happy. Republican strategists, the people who have to take these morons that the party nominates and try to shape them into people that come across as caring and photogenic and whatever enough to get elected, they are not so happy. Their concern is that Democrats will successfully demonize Ryan's budget plan, which contains admittedly controversial spending cuts and changes to Medicare. Now, I think his Medicare proposals are good, but that's beside the point. We're talking American politics now. There are a lot of races that are close to the line that the Republicans are not going to win because they're going to battle out who's going to kill grandma first, Obamacare or Paul Ryan's budget, said one Republican strategist who works specifically on congressional races. It could even put the Senate out of reach. In the House, it puts a bunch of races in play that would have otherwise been safe. It remains to be seen how much damage this causes, but my first blush is that this is not good. Many Republicans in tough races this year, especially in the House, voted for Ryan's proposal, which will make it hard for them to distance themselves from it. Now, it is a good proposal. In all fairness, while I don't think much of Ryan, just because he's always been a Washington guy, it is a good, solid proposal that would ultimately provide a real Medicare, a real medical care for the elderly. But, you know, the left is always illiberal and lies about what the other side's trying to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about the illiberalism shortly. And we're back. And, you know, I've learned over the years that there is no one so illiberal as a liberal. Davidson College in North Carolina is banning Chick-fil-A, and by doing so, I guess they're so proud of themselves because who the hell's heard of Davidson College? But they're getting some national news by doing so, becoming the first college university in the nation to do so. Students began a protest and collected nearly 500 signatures in an online petition calling for the student to stop serving Chick-fil-A at campus-sanctioned events. Davidson doesn't have a Chick-fil-A on campus, but the company's food was served on campus events occasionally. It's not like, okay, I'm sick of the chicken. I've had chicken 17 times in a row. No, it was occasionally. Some colleges have protested the restaurant being on campus, but none has banned the business. It's sheer hypocrisy front-running in some tiny little college about whom no one gives a damn, just trying to grab the press and reach out to the left. In a statement to the university community, the Student Union Board President Adriana Nasser, I wonder if she was related to the former dictator of Egypt, and Vice President Cameron Joe said, quote, "We reached out to the union members to begin initial conversations, but because the board operates on a consensus decision-making, a final decision is being put off until we can have face-to-face conversations and gather more student input. Until a final decision is made, alternative options will be served at after midnight and other union board events. The Davidson College Union Board is firmly committed to building an inclusive community that serves each member of our student body except those who don't believe in same-sex marriage. Now, my big question for all these leftists, all of whom voted for Obama, is when they voted for Obama, he didn't support same-sex marriage, so they call people who oppose same-sex marriage bigots. So did they knowingly vote for a bigot? QED. North Carolina, by the way, voted in May in favor of a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriages, all civil unions, and domestic partnerships. Now, I think in today's world, that is perhaps going too far. I do not support same-sex marriage, but I do believe in civil unions and domestic partnerships because I believe in the free right of contract. Okay? We can't just pick the sins that we don't like and make them illegal. We have to draw a line somewhere, and the place I draw the line is when there is a victim. What consenting adults do may be sinful, may send them to hell, but that's up to God. That's not up to me. I'll let God handle his job, and I'll handle mine, which is to be concerned with my own business and defend where there are victims involved. So I personally believe North Carolina went too far. It was a backlash, and in that way, I think they put themselves perhaps in a false position that's not good because, you know, America has suffered from time to time from these bouts of righteousness. The first big one was prohibition, and all prohibition did, it didn't stop drinking, it probably increased drinking, because now it was prohibited, and it gave us the mafia. Gee, thanks. The war on drugs, which, you know, the United States had no drugs outlawed before 1904, yet we managed to do a pretty good job of growing, surviving as a country before that time. And what has that given us? Well, drugs are available on every street corner, but there is now a vast federal police bureaucracy that has grown out of the war on drugs, and the war on drugs has become a war on individual freedom. Every time the state steps in, the government steps into places where it shouldn't, where it has no right to, where there is no victim, it ends up being on the wrong side and being oppressive and violating someone's rights. God gave us individual freedom knowing that we might do wrong, that we might sin, and we'll pay for it. Now, if we do it against somebody else, we ought to pay for it here and then maybe in the hereafter too. And if we do it with consensually and don't hurt another party, then like I said, am willing to let God handle it in the hereafter, because I am not so sure of myself that I can condemn someone when there's no third party injured. But talking about injury, let's talk about lots of third parties injured. How about the taxpayers? Let's talk about how they've been injured. Losses from too big to fail GM are mounting. Taxpayers will lose even more on the auto bailout than previously thought, as the Treasury Department has just revised its estimate upward to $25 billion. Have you ever noticed they never revise their estimate downward? The only estimate that gets revised downward is the growth of the number of jobs or the growth of the economy. Those get revised downward, but cost revisions are always upward. This may still underestimate the losses to come, and yet Mr. Obama, the man living in that expensive public housing on Pennsylvania Avenue, plans to tout the auto bailout as a key accomplishment of his regime. Politico recently obtained a draft of the planning documents for the Democratic National Convention, another coronation except this to an African tribal beat, finding a repeated focus on the auto bailout. The draft describes the convention's objectives. Tell the story of the president's accomplishments: the auto rescue, manufacturing, ending the war, health care, energy, as central to his fight for the middle class and America's long-term economic strength. Which war did he end? What has he done for health care except potentially make it worse and much more expensive. Energy, the only thing he's done is generate more hot air than any other president that I can think of. If they could bottle the hot air or direct all the hot air generated from the Capitol and the White House, then you really might solve the energy crisis. As the losses continue to grow, will the president acknowledge that the only people truly rescued were unions? That becomes a really interesting question. The president could have kept the automakers running without losing money if he'd restricted his administration's involvement to only providing bankruptcy financing. Instead, the Obama administration involved itself heavily in the bankruptcy process, picking winners and losers instead of following normal bankruptcy laws. When we come back, we'll talk about exactly who those winners and losers were and why, and most of those losers were you and I. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio. We were talking about how the Obama administration got in the middle of a bankruptcy process. And the bankruptcy has rules, and it has rules for who gets what and the order. But, of course, the administration can't resist rewarding those that are on its side and punishing those who are not. And it even plays around in the courts. The Heritage Foundation, with which I don't always agree, but I don't always agree with any organization. Sometimes I'm not sure I even agree with myself all the time. But anyway, it's a well-respected organization in Washington that most people should know about. Their labor expert, James Shirk, and co-author Todd Zawicki found that the taxpayer losses occurred because of one reason. The administration manipulated the bankruptcy law to shelter the United Auto Workers' compensation. None of the losses were necessary to preserve jobs, and taxpayers spent billions to prop up the compensation of some of the most highly paid workers in America. They wrote, quote, "We estimate that the administration redistributed $26.5 billion more to the United Auto Workers than it would have received had it been treated as it is usually would in bankruptcy proceedings. Thus, the entire loss to the taxpayers from the auto bailout comes from the funds diverted to the UAW. Incidentally, those were funds that were taken away from the pension plans of the non-union members. These union members, who were making more than $70 an hour in wages and benefits, received preferential treatment when their companies had to restructure. GM and Chrysler owed billions to a trust fund they'd created to provide UAW members with gold-plated retiree health benefits, and taxpayers ended up paying right into that fund. That doesn't happen in a normal bankruptcy. That isn't fair. That is, it's no wonder that the car companies are going broke. $70 an hour for sticking a screw in here and a bolt in there and putting a windshield in here as it goes down a construction line, what do you call it? Not construction line. The words escape me right now, but you know what I'm talking about. Henry Ford invented it. Production line. That's it. I knew I'd get it eventually. Anyway, it is just criminal, and it is simply the government rewarding the people who support it and screwing over the people who don't support it. Where is the equal protection under law that we are all guaranteed in the Constitution? I don't think it's anywhere. Speaking of something that's not anywhere, Medicare, which is nowhere, which is a bad system that Obamacare will make worse, is going to rise as a prime election issue. I already mentioned how the Republican strategists, the minds behind the pretty faces that they put forward, are concerned. The Gray Lady herself, the New York Times, reported that with Mitt Romney's selection of Representative Paul Ryan as his running mate, Florida quickly emerged on Monday as a critical test of this nationwide Republican gamble that concerns over the mounting federal debt could blunt and deflect a very powerful Democratic attacks on the conservative proposals to revamp Medicare. Quote, "To me, social programs are important. Consequently, not to support people who are in need of medical assistance shows a callous disregard to the populace. That was said by Shepard Lane, who's 70, in Boca Raton. Does he give a damn about his grandchildren if he has any? Or are they expected to pay through the nose? Does he like the system where the drug companies and the big banks and the big health management organizations are all getting rich? And that makes anyone who wants to change the system and make it more efficient, more private, with more selections, and provide more people with better health care, does that make it callous? I think Shepard Lane is probably just a greedy old man thinking about himself. I'm 59 years old, so I guess I'm an old man too, and I try to think about the next generation and what are they going to survive, or are the old people going to bleed the economy to death because they were told they didn't have to save any money, they didn't have to plan for their retirement, and of course government contributed to that by subprime mortgages, by the inflation of the dollar making it devalue constantly. There's a whole lot of criminals involved, but Medicare or Medicaid is not the prime criminal. Another person said, I don't know much about Paul Ryan, just what I've skimmed in the newspapers, but I don't trust Romney. You got so much money, what do you want the job for? Just power? That's what it seems like to me. That was about Ed Sandy in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He seems a little smarter. Paul Ryan is young and he has a lot of good ideas. Obama was on TV this morning saying he was going to give $30 million to farmers because of the drought. My question is, where is that money coming from? That was from Marion McFadden. She's 92. Seems like the older they get, the smarter, because they had the traditional values that made America great inculcated in them, and they weren't part of this grabby generation that always take care of me, it's someone else's fault. As Mr. Romney campaigned through Florida on Monday, Democrats greeted him with a barrage of assaults, including a web advertisement featured worried elderly voters in this battleground state. The campaign took on a more heated air as President Obama suggested in Iowa that the Republican ticket would, quote, end Medicare as we know it, a warning echoed in North Carolina by Vice President Joseph Biden. Of course he had to echo it. He couldn't think of a line of his own. Assailing the proposed changes to the retiree health plan is a time-tested line of attack, nowhere more so than in Florida. I grew up there. I know it. Where, St. Petersburg, the last city in which I lived before I left the United States, was called the land of the newlywed and the nearly dead. Voters older than 65 make up 22% of the electorate, made up 22% of the electorate in the 2008 presidential election. Polls show that a majority of elderly voters nationally oppose changes in Medicare or Social Security, which Mr. Ryan has in the past also proposed altering, because there ain't any money there, people. All of you people who are saying they're going to take away my Social Security, Obama and George Bush and all the people who've run up the debts beforehand have already taken it away. The Social Security lockbox is empty. When you open it, moths will fly out because all of your Social Security money was invested in U.S. Treasury bonds and loaned back to the government. So you just paid a tax. You didn't put any money away. You trusted the government because you didn't look at how the system worked. And I feel sorry for you, but if you voted for these people, part of the responsibility is yours. Now, the implications of this, of course, extend far beyond Florida. There are significant elderly forces in Iowa, New Hampshire, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, all the states that could help determine the outcome of the election. Aides to Mr. Obama said they would focus on older voters in those states by spotlighting Mr. Ryan's proposal, broadly endorsed by Mr. Romney, very broadly, I might add, and with his hand. If you notice in any picture where he's endorsing, he has one hand behind his back because he's got his fingers crossed, to make Medicaid a choice between private insurance and traditional coverage in the belief that the more competition involved would drive costs down and improve care. Tell me where more competition doesn't do that. You can't. Democrats say the plan under which retirees would get a set amount of money from the government each year to purchase insurance coverage would lead to higher costs and lower quality care for many retirees. Baloney. Competition, a free market, always favors the consumer over the businesses. Okay, if you've got, it's just the law of supply and demand in economics. If you have not enough health care to go around, it's going to cost more than if you've got lots of health care. And if it's privatized and then you can spend it wherever you want, then some doctors who don't need to live in $5 million mansions and drive $100,000 cars and have $500,000 boats will provide care at a cheaper rate than those who are forced into a system and have to charge their private patients $90 for a visit while they get $18 back from Medicare and Medicaid. It's a stupid system that was originally intended only to add to people's life savings, and now it has become the center of it, which means it's made everybody dependent upon the government, and all the old people are being made into serfs. They're the first ones who are going to be made into serfs. And, you know, if I was old, I'd worry, because under this government health care plan, they can decide that you're not worth keeping. So they may just decide to off you, and euthanasia is just around the corner, people. Now we're at the top of the hour, so we have to pause for the news and some other things. I'll be back in a while, and we'll be talking on Technology Tuesday. This is David Finzer. This is David Finzer broadcasting for the second hour from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia, on my 5,234th day of voluntary exile across 6 countries in protest from an ever less free America. To comment during the program, you can send a Skype text message at Truth and Lies Radio, all crammed together as one word, or you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com. As soon as our new studio is finished, you'll also be able to call toll-free from the U.S. and Canada or Skype and join the conversation. Also remember to check out our Facebook and YouTube pages on Truth and Lies Radio Show. According to the U.S. debt clock, the total U.S. national debt is $15,969,988,000,000, $50,000, almost $51,000 debt per citizen, and $139,000 debt per taxpayer as you draw your own conclusions. The GDP is a good 700 billion behind, and the total U.S. debt is a staggering, humongous, incredible, just scary behemoth of $56,966,459. The U.S. is broke and no one wants to admit it. Well, assuming the technology is working, today is Technology Tuesday, which means my co-host and our technology expert is Nicholas Finzer, my nephew, and the CEO of Internet Totality LLC in St. Petersburg, Florida. Hello, Nick.
Hi, how's it going?
Fine. You made it through the thunderstorm, I guess.
I did. Yep.
Very good. So God didn't try to strike you dead. That's a good sign.
Apparently, I'm still on his good list.
Good.
Somehow.
I suspect the White House must have an awful lot of lightning rods on top just to make sure. Anyway, speaking about the White House, White House counterterrorism advisor John Brennan says the White House may take steps to get U.S. businesses to protect themselves from computer attacks if they are responsible for providing critical services like water or electricity. Now, what's your take on this story?
Well, I don't know what steps the White House can take legally. I no idea on that.
Well, they don't ever worry about legality. We're talking about the Obama White House.
Well, that's true enough. I understand the federal government's concern with critical services like that, and on the surface, it makes some sense for them to be involved, but my concern is that they're completely unqualified to make any sort of recommendations or especially, rules that companies have to follow.
Okay.
If it's coming out of Congress, especially, you got 538 people who don't have a clue about technology, and you want them to try to make the laws that everyone has to follow to secure their networks. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And I don't think the White House is any different. I mean, he might have some halfway decent advisors. I don't know, but I just can't see anything good coming out of it, really.
Well, I mean, how did we survive for years when water or electricity would go down for a while because of hurricanes or thunderstorms or whatever? We didn't need a federal mandate then.
That's true. I mean, if it goes down, it goes down. Obviously, the concern here is cyber attacks, which basically means China. But I don't know how these systems work to know what kind of damage they can actually do, if there's actually any risk to life or property. But it seems to be the most likely thing they could do would just turn it off for a little while.
Right.
So, it seems like overkill to me.
Yeah, just one more way to get the government inside critical businesses, perhaps. If I were a conspiracy theorist, I would say that it's one more way for the government to get involved so that it can turn things off as well.
Yeah, there's the potential for that if they're putting some sort of control in. If they're just saying you have to do this, you have to do that, then that's not very likely, at least for now, although maybe setting, if I want to put my tinfoil hat on, it could be setting the precedent that they could then later go in and say you have to install this government security device that lets them cut things off or whatever. But that's all speculation, of course.
Sure, but of course, history teaches us certain lessons. The South lost the war between the states because the national government had a big navy and basically could destroy the South economically. It cut off things essential goods that the South needed. So if they're worried about really using the NDAA or some of these other things, then being able to cut off power and water to parts of the to states that engage in nullification, etc., that's a big stick.
Yeah, and interestingly, from what I understand of the power grid, it actually does span all the way across the country. You can actually buy power from a state, several states across. So there is this big, interconnected network that I suppose they could, it makes it easy. Sounds like it would make it easy for them to cut off power to a whole state or something like that if they had that ability.
Okay. And so it just, I don't see the crisis here. I mean, I don't see the need for this except for negative uses. I mean, I just don't see it.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's been no catastrophe in any of these services caused by cyber attacks, so...
No, in Florida you're in greater danger from hurricanes, and I don't think Obama can control them yet.
No, probably not.
Although some of the tin hat crowd probably thinks he can, because they think he can make earthquakes.
Yeah, I'm sure they think he has airplanes that cause hurricanes or something.
Yeah, more likely they just watch us. But the White House, of course, is not to be trusted, and it doesn't really even keep its own promises. The White House has a website for petitions, We the People, and there's a quote on that website. When I ran for this office, I pledged to make government more open and accountable to its citizens. That's what the new We the People feature on whitehouse.gov is all about, giving Americans a direct line to the White House on the issues and concerns that matter to them most, and it's signed President Barack Obama. And I guess you have a story about that shows he didn't really keep his promise.
Yeah, exactly. So, a little background on the story is federal court ruled that with TSA's nude body scanners that they had violated the law by not holding a public comment and hearing session like they're required to, and so they ruled that they have to do this, and of course TSA just ignored the courts and hasn't done it. So a privacy watchdog group called EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, they went on to this We the People site and created a petition. And the petition just asked that TSA follow the law and follow the law and the court ruling. And based on the rules of this We the People thing that the administration set out is that if a petition gets to 25,000 people, signers, they're required to publicly respond to the petition. So I think this petition got to about 23,000, and once that happened, the White House suddenly decided that its time was up and closed it, without any further comment. And I guess there was still supposed, the time frame for them to get those signatures hadn't lapsed yet, but the White House didn't want to respond to this issue, so they just closed down the petition.
Well, I looked at the We the People website. There's a whole lot of really stupid petitions on there.
There are a lot of really stupid petitions on there. I can't think of any examples right now, but I do remember when I was looking at the site that there were a lot of really, really stupid ones.
Well, I know the federal court has now given the TSA till the 30th of August, so a little more than 2 weeks, to actually hold the hearings, or the court is now going to get a little nastier. So it would be sort of nice to have the court groping the TSA instead of the TSA groping us.
True. Yeah, I mean, with their last thing, they didn't penalize TSA at all for non-compliance, but hopefully they will coming up.
Well, even federal judges have used the airlines.
Right.
And so, it's obvious when they go all the way back to when they arrested, and that's what it was legally, according to Juan Torres, because Rand Paul was not permitted to leave, so he was under arrest. When they arrested a United States senator and detained him on the way to a session of Congress, which is absolutely, clearly, unequivocally unconstitutional, the TSA just doesn't really give a damn about the Constitution. It's like the federal government has subcontracted the TSA out to the mafia.
Yeah. Well, they clearly don't care, so it's something has to, the courts or the legislature or somebody has to get involved and put them in their place.
Well, of course, it comes down to, I think the only way to really do this is the court could do what it's done in a lot of other cases. For example, let's just switch the subject. It's away from technology just for purposes of example. But one of the things they've done, when they lowered the federal speed limit, they didn't say the states had to. They just, you lost your money if you didn't lower your speed limit. Exactly. If you had prayer in school, you lost your education funds. So the court could simply issue an injunction that if the TSA does not obey the rules, then it can't have any more money.
Well, that could be effective.
I mean, I am absolutely convinced that the best way to fight back is to attack the funding, not attack the laws anymore, because it takes too much to repeal laws, and it takes too much to pass a law through 2 houses of Congress and try to get a president to sign. But it only takes one house to say we won't fund what you're doing anymore, and even the TSA thugs aren't going to work for free.
Right.
So anyway, now when we come back, it's time for the bottom of the hour news. When we come back, we'll talk about, the TSA always is groping people, so we'll talk a little bit more about some private parts in just a few minutes. This is David Finzer with Nick Finzer on Technology Tuesday with Truth and Lies Radio. Don't go away. We'll be back in a few minutes with some more good talk. So I'm joined with our technology expert, my nephew Nicholas Finzer, and we were talking about the TSA groping privates. Let's talk about the DOJ groping our privates, but this is our private data. In the 5 years since Apple launched the iPhone, the popular device has gone from a malicious hacker's dream to law enforcement's worst nightmare. As recounted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Technology Review, gee, what a really snazzy name, A Justice Department official recently took the stage at the DFRWS Computer Forensic Conference in Washington and told attendees that the beefed up security in the iOS, which I assume is the operating system, is now so good that it has become a nightmare for law enforcement. He said, quote, "I can tell you from the Department of Justice perspective that if that drive is encrypted, you're done." What's that mean for our privacy, and what's this all about?
Well, apparently, at least according to them, the iPhone is the most secure of the smartphone devices out there from perspective of the government not getting into your data. Now, if I were to put my tinfoil hat back on, I would say that maybe it's actually the least secure, and that's why the DOJ is saying this, to get everyone to use them.
Well, I remember, Nick, a couple of months ago, the news was that the Samsung, the Android was safer, was more secure.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, first of all, it's a little hard to quantify, right, which is more secure. I can tell you from what I know of mobile development that the iPhone, by its very architecture and the way it's set up, is a lot harder to get into, to do things with, at least by default. There's a process called jailbreaking that gives you access to the more core functionality, the lower level kind of stuff, and lets you also do things like pirate software and whatnot. But which is why a lot of people do it. And I think in that case, you might be giving them more access that's not there by default. The system really does really seem pretty locked down as opposed to Android, which seems much more open in general. As far as what they're talking about, first of all, these things start with the iPhone 4S. Everything before that seems relatively insecure. There's a guy out there who makes all these forensic tools for iOS, which yes is the operating system that runs on iPads and iPhones, and he offers them for free to law enforcement and to law enforcement only. He runs a website, and he has all these tools for breaking the cryptography and everything else, and just any sort of forensic data they'd want to get off of it. But I did go look at his website before doing the show, and I did notice that all his tools only work up till the iPhone 4. It doesn't work on the iPhone 4S. It doesn't work on the iPad 2. It doesn't work on the new iPad. So there may actually be something to this. I don't have the knowledge and the in-depth understanding of the forensic technology and the proprietary systems that Apple develops, because they don't give you a whole lot of details about these. They are pretty closed mouth. To say if this is 100% true or not, but it's certainly interesting.
Is there any kind of PGP or encryption like that works on an iPhone?
I don't think there's any that works on an unjailbroken iPhone.
Okay.
See, Apple. The thing with the jailbreaking and non-jailbreaking is, if you don't have a jailbroken iPhone, Apple has complete control of what you put on your phone. If they don't put it in the Android, and I'm sorry, not the Android, they don't put it in the App Store, you can't install it. There's just really no mechanism for you to install software on your phone that's not sanctioned by Apple, which is not true in the case of Android. It's very easy to install custom software on Android. They don't care. So if you want to install anything that a third party has developed that Apple doesn't want on your phone, then you have to go through this jailbreaking process that gives you, more or less unlimited access to the phone and lets you circumvent a lot of Apple's controls.
Okay, and so how does jailbreaking get done? I mean,
well, there's these sort of hacker groups or whatever that understand how this stuff works and excuse me, and figure out how to reverse engineer parts of it. And it's generally by the time it gets to the consumer, jailbreaking is an extremely simple process as far as what you actually have to do. It's a matter of plugging your phone into your computer and clicking a button usually, and then it takes 5 minutes or something.
Okay, so it's a more It's a more technologically intense thing of like unlocking a phone so you're not just stuck with Verizon or AT&T or whatever.
Yeah, and with an iPhone, that's called unlocking a phone, letting it be used on other carriers. Usually on an iPhone, jailbreaking is the first thing you have to do before you can unlock it. But they are still somewhat separate processes. So there are, for instance, I think on some of the iPhones, an unlock hasn't been found yet, whereas a jailbreak has. One thing I did notice while researching this is that there's, in the older phones, the ones before 4S, there is it's a much lower level exploit that lets you jailbreak, meaning it's not something they can fix with a software update, whereas all the ones that have come out since are in software, meaning they can just send an update out and fix that hole. It's not part of the firmware running on the phone. So that does also seem to say that, maybe at the lower level these phones are more secure now than they used to be.
And since I guess more and more people are using phones almost in place of computers in many cases, phones and iPhones and iPads, this is an important issue.
Right. Yeah. And there's been a lot of security issues that came out with the iPhone. At one point, someone determined that whether you had your location set on or not, the phone was keeping a file that just tracked your GPS coordinates throughout the day, and after so many hours it would reset or whatever. But the phone was keeping track of where you were going, whether you told it to or not. And so if law enforcement got your phone, they would know where you were going, or where you had been, rather.
Wow, that's a little scary. So you're carrying your own tracker, and you really don't have a choice about it.
Right. Well, that has been solved, as far as I know.
Good. Okay. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about the lengths to which the government will go to track us and to cause problems for people that the government doesn't like. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio. This is David Finzer, and we're back on Technology Tuesday with my technology co-host, Nicholas Finzer, the CEO of Internet Totality, LLC in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now, if you and I believe that the government's out to get us, we're paranoid. But if the government believes that somebody's out to get them, it's policy. The FBI believed that Kim.com had a doomsday device capable of erasing all piracy evidence, which is why anybody with a brain that's more powerful than that of a sheep may be wondering why the New Zealand government, which is normally pretty easy to get along with. I do a lot of business with in New Zealand, and the government is quite easy to get along with, at least in my experience, utilized its elite counterterrorism unit to raid Mega Upload founder Kim.com's mansion. And now, via the New Zealand Herald, we have our answer. The FBI actually believed that .com had a Dr. Strangelove-style doomsday device that was capable of wiping out all evidence of internet piracy with the flick of a switch. What do you think, Nick?
Well, if they actually believe that, it's pretty stupid, first of all. But what I really liked out of this is I was watching some of the video from the New Zealand court hearings or court proceedings or whatever they are over this whole case, and I watched some of the ridiculous footage. I'm sure you saw it too when they raided his mansion there, and they flew in with a helicopter and had 5 police vehicles barge in, and they had basically a SWAT team, whatever the New Zealand people call it, rush in with M4s and bust in and find him in upstairs, and then they beat the crap out of him a little bit. And the whole scene was just ridiculous over copyright infringement. But the FBI was behind it all, and what the FBI told them was, we need to hurry up and get this, otherwise he'll be able to destroy evidence. But I guess they thought he had some sort of doomsday device that did not exist. They never found anything like this. But what I found most fascinating when I was watching this is that before they even raided his house, the FBI was already in the data centers where the servers are, and had already disconnected them. So they knew he couldn't destroy anything. They knew he couldn't delete any evidence. They already had it in their possession, and they just did this because they're, thugs.
Well, they lied.
Right.
In other words, they lied. I mean, a perfect example, again, away from technology, but this happened to a friend of mine in Australia who had been fighting with the IRS. He refused to pay his taxes, but he put up a cash bond to cover any taxes. He traveled around the world because he's a well-known day trader. He actually will go in front of 1,000 people and trade his own money online on a huge screen. And he was in Australia when his daughter won an Academy Award. Well, the IRS, the government, never let a good good news item go to waste. They were able to play on that, and they had him arrested. Now, the problem is in Australia, tax evasion is not a crime. It's not. It's a civil offense. Only tax fraud is a crime. And the way they got around that was they flat out lied in the extradition request. The extradition request contained 7 paragraphs in which they said he laundered millions of dollars of money for drug cartels. Now, it came out in court, and it went all the way to the Australian Supreme Court before he beat them, returned to the United States on his terms, not on the IRS's terms. And when it went to trial, after the prosecution made its case, the judge, in a very rare instance, dismissed 9 of the counts. The jury found him guilty of 3 counts of misdemeanor non-filing with no money owed. So the federal government lies on purpose, especially to foreign governments. I mean, that sounds like what they did here.
Yeah, it's another case of pretty much the exact same thing. They lied to the foreign government. They lied to the foreign police force. And I was watching even the news, a little bit of a clip from the New Zealand news on the subject, and the anchor even said, if this looks rather American to you, it's because the FBI was behind it.
Sure.
So apparently these sort of SWAT raids aren't nearly as common in New Zealand as they are in the United States.
Or in Australia, or even in Britain. I mean, they are rather more civilized. It's like when I go through British airports. They're as thorough, or probably more thorough than the morons in the TSA, but they're polite. And, I mean, they handle it gently. And you go through Switzerland, the same thing. It's getting to the point where eventually foreign governments are going to stop taking the U.S. extradition requests at face value and demanding real proof that will hold up in court before they start acting, because this probably is embarrassing the New Zealand government. I was sure as hell be embarrassed.
Yeah, it seemed like they were fairly embarrassed, and that the courts are recognizing a lot of this as well. So, and talking about embarrassment, let's talk about how Google has been embarrassed. Google will have to pay the Federal Trade Commission a $22.5 million fine, I guess, to settle claims it violated a privacy agreement with the FTC by secretly tracking Apple Safari users, according to an announcement made last Thursday by the agency. The search engine was accused of writing code to bypass user privacy settings in Apple's Safari browser, allowing the company to track users' web browsing activities through its advertising network. So, what's going on there? Well, okay, so in case anyone doesn't know, Safari is Apple's web browser, and by default, it has a thing in there where it doesn't allow tracking cookies by default. Tracking cookies being what advertisers, especially Google, use to see where you go across the web. So Google found a way to get around that base, blocking of tracking cookies there in order to put its tracking cookies on Apple Safari users. They did this particularly for their +1 button that they have as part of Google Plus, the social network they put together. So, it's pretty underhanded, actually. I've defended Google in the past over some of their alleged privacy invasions and whatnot, but I can't really see any defense here. They say that no personal information was gathered, and that's probably pretty true. No, certainly no credit cards or anything like that. Names, possibly. But, you know, there's just, they said it was inadvertent too, which I just can't believe for a second. There's no way that, I don't know how you accidentally do something like this.
It's like accidentally breaking into a house.
Yeah, pretty much. So I'm not, you know, I have no defense for Google on this.
And it was done to enhance their advertising network, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much exactly it. And you know, the FTC gave them, you know, the greatest fine in history. So they made some sort of record here, and that fine's not going to hurt their business. I mean, their advertising business is like $30 billion or something. But you know, it's kind of embarrassing, and it's not good PR. And they probably deserve it, as far as I can tell.
Well, considering their total revenue for 2011 was almost $38 billion.
Yep.
This is a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's like the Federal Trade Commission acting as if they're protecting people, but if they really wanted to give a punitive award, the legal definition, as I recall from Juan, is that a punitive award is one that is big enough to hurt but not destroy a company. And when you have a $38 billion in revenue, a mere $25.5 million fine doesn't even hurt.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt them monetarily, at least. I mean, it could cause them some bad publicity and embarrassment and that sort of thing, but it's not going to hurt their bottom line much.
Okay, well, we've got a minute left. In this last minute, Skype is now making user data more available to police. And you've got just a little bit. You want to give us a quick summary on that?
Quick summary. Let's see. Well, the way Skype used to work is it's a peer-to-peer network, meaning the calls are routed through other people's computers, basically, that are become what's called a supernode, meaning they have high bandwidth, high CPU, whatever, and they can help route calls through the internet for Skype. Well, what Microsoft changed was they made all those supernodes centralized on their servers, so now they can see all the calls that are happening, and they can potentially then turn that information over. And one interesting thing I want to throw in there is that Microsoft actually applied for a wiretapping patent that specifically referenced Skype 17 months before they actually bought Skype.
So this was not an accident.
Right.
Okay, well, so we've got lots of people watching us, and the government seems to have its hand in everything. All I can tell you is what I tell everybody all the time. Remember, you only have 3 choices. Give in and live like a serf, fight back, or get out. This is David Finzer.